Hi, welcome to session 3. In this session, we are going to build a pet store service. In this session, we are going to take a look at MongoDB reactive repositories. We're going to learn how to use the Spring Data repository abstraction with reactive API. Spring Security for authentication and authorization. We're going to learn how to use Spring Security to authenticate and authorize users to specific APIs. And we're going to build a user registration mechanism to allow new users in the system. So let's get started with video 3.1, where we're going to bootstrap our project. In this session, we're going to bootstrap our Spring Boot application using the Spring Initializer. We're going to connect to MongoDB, and we're going to load some mock data to our database. Okay, MongoDB is a NoSQL database used in many companies in the industry. It has a flexible schema and can be scaled horizontally. We are going to work with it using a Spring Data Reactive Mongo driver. So if you don't have MongoDB in your system, I recommend you to go to this page in the documents mongodb.com on the manual and download regarding your operating system the right installation that you need. In my case, I Mac OS, so I just downloaded the full MongoDB file and run it locally on my machine. So in order to run MongoDB, if you are on a Mac, just go into the directory. In the bin folder, you can run the Mongo server, MongoD. This runs the Mongo database, and then on another terminal, if you want to test if it's working correctly, you can also run the Mongo tool, that is the command line interface, and you can do sample show DBS, and you can see that we have connectivity. Okay, now let's go to the Spring Initializer and let's create a Gradle project using Java, and in my case, Spring Boot 2.0.3. Let's generate a project on the Spring Initializer using Gradle, Java, and Spring Boot 2.0.3. Put anything you want on the group, and we're going to call the artifact pet store. And for dependencies, we're going to use reactive web, reactive Mongo, and Lombug. So click generate project and save it wherever you want. Okay, then let's go to IntelliJ and open the project. Okay, now IntelliJ is going to start downloading and configuring our dependencies. Okay, so now we have our pet store application. Let's start by configuring the access and the connectivity to our Mongo database. So now that we have our project configured by IntelliJ, let's create a new package called config, and inside config, let's create a class called appconfig. Here's where we are going to configure our connectivity to MongoDB. Now that we have appconfig, let's add some configuration. First, we're going to extend from the abstract reactive Mongo configuration. This is an abstract class that has some methods that we have to implement in order to connect to Mongo with the reactive driver. So for the Mongo client, we are just going to use the default one. So we are going to use Mongo clients, and we are going to use create. We are using the default settings for running our Mongo server, so it's going to connect to the correct port. And for the database name, let's use pet store. Okay, now we're going to add a new annotation for this class called enable reactive Mongo repositories. This is in order to use the reactive repositories later in this course. Now that we have configured our connectivity to the application, let's load the mock data into our database. So let's go to the terminal. So I created a file with mock data to add to our database. You are free to create your own, but I'm gonna add it to the repository files. So when you clone the repository and you check out the branch 3.1, you should see this file, and this is the fielddb.js that has some mock data that we're going to insert in batch in our database. So in order to load it, let's go to Mongo CLI, and here we're going to create a database called pet store. When you use database name, if you don't have the database, it's going to be created once you put data on it. Now that we have our DB, we can use ls command line to see the files that are on the path, and we can see that we have the fielddb.js file. This is the files that we need to fill the mock data on our DB. So we're going to use the command load and then fielddb.js. Okay, this is going to load the mock data into our database. Perfect. So now we check DB, we create two tables, DB pet and DB pet store user, and we use the command find. We see that we have two users, and if we use the pet.find, we see that we have some mock pets on our DB. Excellent. Okay, for the last step, let's run our application and see if the connection with our DB is correct. So go wherever you have your pet store application, and let's run it with Gradle boot run. Oh, one thing before running, let's go back to our code, and in application.properties, even that we declare the name of the DB table on our app.config class, let's add a property Spring Data MongoDB database with the database name. I don't know why, maybe this is a bug, but when I add the name of the database in the app.config, it didn't work. But you have to implement this method because we are extending from the abstract reactive Mongo configuration. So by adding it to the application property, it works. So remember to do that. Now we are ready. Let's run our application. Once you place a connection to MongoDB on a Spring Boot, if you don't have your DB running, it will fail to init the server, like right now. So let's see what happened. Okay, this is my bad. I have an application running on the port. So let's try it again. Sorry, it seems I didn't disconnect it properly. Let's check. This happens sometimes. Actually, this is good practice because this happens sometimes that you're running a Spring Boot ad and then you run another one, and even though that you kill it, it's still running in the background. So you can use ps odds grep, and you can use 8080 to see if a project running on 8080. If not, you can use a Spring. Okay, so there is a project running with a Spring, and you can just kill it. So we see this one running. Excellent. So let's just kill it. There is another one. Excellent. Now there is no web server running. Let's run Gradle again. It should work now. So if you see in my upper tab, I have MongoDB running, and I can see the connections happening when are open and closed. So I can see that there was a connection right now. So that's good. That means that our server connected to it, and we can see that the server is running in port 8080. That's good. And we can see the cluster was created in localhost port 27017. That's the port that MongoDB used by default. So we're good to go.